Alright everybody, how we doing today? It's time for a, let's say it's a two-part video today. This is going to be covering Brexit, so bear with me. From abruptly, UK Prime Minister Johnson refuses to negotiate Brexit delay past October 31st with EU despite just passed amendment. And also, Parliament versus the people, yet another vote to delay Brexit. We'll start here. By voting for the Letwin Wrecking Amendment, Parliament is trying to force yet another Brexit delay. If politicians weren't already unpopular enough, they'll be even more so after today's debacle. This is substantial public support for Boris Johnson's deal for leaving on October 31st. A YouGov poll that found that about 41 to 24% Britain wanted Parliament to pass the deal and leave the European Union. That might well have played on the minds of Remain-supporting MPs in strongly leave constituencies. If the deal had been put to a genuine vote, it might well have passed. The atmosphere was tense. At first, it had seemed the mood of Parliament was different today. Parliament had not sat on a Saturday for 37 years, since the Falklands War amongst the bluff and bluster, the grandstanding and sound bites. Something had changed. The numbers were tight, MPs were listening, trying to persuade each other in their speeches. So, is this a rare glimpse into what happens when politicians actually start talking like intelligent human beings? Because that certainly sounds like what I'm hearing. And I know, some politicians are smart, are truly smart people. But a lot of the time, they just don't act like it. They simply do not. Then Oliver Letwin's Wrecking Amendment passed in an attempt to force an indefinite delay to the deal. The mask slipped, the nastiness was back, and we were back to the usual circus. Go figure. Conservative MPs walked out of the chamber in disgust, refusing to take part in the sham. As the government announced, we'll be back to the same debate on Monday. We keep going round in circles, but nothing is ever delivered. Ever more arcane parliamentary procedures are being used. Parliament had an opportunity today to bring much of the nation back together, but it declined to do so. It pitted itself against the people. Poll after poll has shown that people want Brexit to be done. For all the Remainers talking about a hypothetical second referendum that could take place until the summer of next year. The reality is that when people are asked about what should happen now, they say we should get on with it. Polling about practical questions matter more than the hypothetical ones. Well, of course practical questions matter more. That's a simple matter of logic. It's not like the other EU countries where the people are not being properly represented. Surprisingly, the people are fairly well represented in the United Kingdom. However, I would say that the way they're represented is lackluster. The politicians in England, as within many countries, definitely seem like they think that everything should be done their way. That their way is the only way. Which I don't think I need to explain to you is actually pretty damn arrogant. As a quick side note, there's a good pun in a sign here that a protester is holding. It says, "Stop this existential crisis." That's a good pun on the term existential crisis. That actually makes me laugh a little. But no, that is a wonderful pun. But proceeding, in theory, the Ben Act requires the Prime Minister by law to send the EU Council a letter requesting an EU extension. Once again, the Prime Minister has hinted that he has found a way around it. We are still none the wiser as to the government's plan at the time of writing, but matters are proceeding at a fast pace. Many viewers watching today's scenes will think that they reflect badly upon all politicians. It seems that they have lost sight of any desire to represent their constituents. We're left closer and closer to the October 31st date, and still there is no certainty as to what will happen, deal or no deal, or yet another Brexit extension. This is nail-biting stuff. Most television could not get more exciting. I'm just kidding. No, this Brexit deliberation is like a dog chasing its tail. Eventually it's going to bite itself, or it's just going to get tired and give up. But three and a half full years on the referendum, it feels like the film Groundhog Day. Yes, I agree. This impasse must be broken, or impasse. There's an E there, blah. Must be broken, but the only way that our politicians can be changed is through a general election. Yet repeated motions for a general election have failed to pass too. The overwhelming feeling of the British people right now is one of utter frustration. Whenever there has been a choice between further infighting and reuniting the country, politicians have chosen further infighting. They have ensured their own continued and increasing unpopularity. Yeah, even when they're trying to represent their people properly, the British politicians and politicians in general just continue to prove to be some of the most childlike, in a bad way, and some of the most unreasonable and just plain petty people in the world. It's absurd that politicians get to act this way in any country. And as to Boris Johnson refusing to negotiate the Brexit delay, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stuck by his vow to leave the European Union by October 31st, even though he admitted he will write to EU officials after Parliament voted to withhold support for his deal. He says, "I will not negotiate a delay with the EU, and neither does the law compel me to do so." Johnson told Parliament after the passage of the Letwin Amendment in addition to Johnson's proposed deal, that withhold support for the plan until legislation required to pass the bill is passed by Parliament as well. In effect, the passage of the amendment means Johnson is now required to ask Brussels for a 3-month delay to Brexit by the end of Saturday as mandated by the Benn Act. Johnson, however, signaled he may defy the act, telling lawmakers that further delay will be bad for this country, bad for the European Union, and bad for democracy. In a letter to MPs later on Saturday, Johnson said that he will tell the EU the same, adding it's quite possible that our friends in the European Union will reject Parliament's request for further delay or take a decision quickly. Instead, he said that his government will introduce fresh Brexit legislation when the Commons meet again next week. So he's going to try to negotiate another deal before the time runs out. Well, you kind of have to admire the man's stubbornness, but I really don't think that any deal he's going to come up with is something that the EU is really going to agree to. I just don't see that being a thing. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be all wet, but I don't think they're going to agree to any deal that he has to propose. I just don't see that being a thing. Partly because the EU wants to discourage a Brexit action. They're going to try to delegitimize it in any way they can, and if being difficult is going to accomplish that goal, then, well, that's what they're going to do. But the Letwin Amendment, as described by its author, Tory MP Sir Oliver Letwin, was intended as an insurance policy to hold up Johnson's deal until the legislation required to enact it is passed. Johnson said that any vote on his deal would not be meaningful if the bill passed, as Parliament would still withhold its approval. The House of Commons has stated that Johnson is mandated by law to seek an extension, while opposition leaders have threatened the Prime Minister with court should he ignore it. Johnson's options are now limited. The Prime Minister could technically fulfill the obligations of the Benn Act and ask the EU for an extension, while at the same time sending another letter asking Europe to ignore the first. The EU could also grant the UK a shorter extension than the 3 months mandated by Benn, which would allow Johnson to keep pressure on the opposition and prevent them from debating and changing the content of his deal. With the Prime Minister's path to Brexit uncertain, a spokeswoman for EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker asked for the UK government to inform us about the next steps as soon as possible. Oh, don't you just feel the assertive, manly power of Boris Johnson? Just, ugh. But no, as a joke, but in all seriousness, the dude is amazingly stubborn. It's incredible, actually. The EU is going to have a hard time trying to have their way with him. They really are. And to the point, I really feel that they're just going to have a no-deal Brexit. Maybe. I strongly think they're going to have a no-deal Brexit. But I want to hold out to hope for you British folks, because I've always really liked the British. I mean, I've enjoyed your television, your hilarious accents. I actually have a lot of really close British friends who I wish that lived here in America with me, so I could just spend that much more time with them. You're beautiful people. And I hope Brexit goes well for you. I really do. But, and as much as I want to hold on to that hope that Boris Johnson could get a deal, I just don't think it's going to happen. It just doesn't feel realistic. Shit's going to hit the fan, and I hope you beautiful people have the chance to survive. That's all I got to say about that. Peace.